Hello and welcome to The Window, brought to you by talkSPORT Bet. My name is Harry Dome. Joining me on today's episode is Ben Jacobs, who has some mighty big breaking news. I tell you what, we already recorded one episode. Ben, over to you. What is happening with the future of Benjamin Šeško?
Yeah, take two. When we first spoke a couple of hours ago, we felt Manchester United might bid. Now, at lunchtime on Tuesday, they have just bid, which means we've got two formal bids for Benjamin Šeško. Yesterday, a Newcastle improved offer, 80 million euros plus add-ons. Today, Manchester United, 75 million euros, 10 million in add-ons. The Manchester United bid in the fixed fee part matches Leipzig's quoted price. Of course, they would still have to agree payment terms. 10 million in add-ons takes it above that 80 million euros mark. Now, at the time we're live, and it could move very, very quickly today and tomorrow, neither club has got a yes. But what I can tell you is that both feel the Leipzig part of this deal will be relatively routine from here, because neither are off Leipzig's ballpark valuation. The part that's been harder is who is Šeško going to pick. And Newcastle decided to try and go fast on the Leipzig side, hoping that Manchester United couldn't get close to their valuation and would back off. Manchester United's tactic, which looked a bit risky yesterday, but could now pay off, was to go to Šeško to get full player buy-in, and with that, make a bid to Leipzig with more confidence that they'll be able to get it over the line on the club-to-club side. So my understanding is, although Šeško isn't so black and white as to say no to one club and yes to the other, because they're both great projects and clubs. Newcastle have got Champions League football. Manchester United is just Manchester United. So it isn't quite as clear-cut as one he wants and one he doesn't want, but he is leaning, I am told, towards Manchester United. And Manchester United would not have made their formal bid, having had every opportunity yesterday to walk away from the deal due to the high valuation, unless Šeško has told them that he is also keen on the move. So there's still some work to be done for both clubs to try and agree a package with Leipzig. But Manchester United, at the time we're live, appear now to be the clear front runners.
Isn't that so strange, though? Obviously, you've got a team with European football in Newcastle, but then it's just the gravitas, the word, the name, the global brand football club, which is Manchester United, and maybe he wants to be a part of that rebuild under Ruben Amorim.
Yeah, I think it's not so much just that, although some players naturally love the idea of the history of a big club like Manchester United. But look at the Newcastle United project, one of the richest and most ambitious owners in the world. Fantastic city, brilliant fan base, won a trophy last season, have Champions League football. So I feel a little bit sympathetic to Newcastle's situation, because it's being billed as they're entering races, João Pedro, James Trafford, two other examples, that they cannot win once a Big Six club enters the race. But ultimately, this is Newcastle United at an earlier stage of their project compared to some of the Big Six clubs that also can fund these kind of deals because they have a huge history of sales. And they're being far more ambitious. So they're fighting against direct rivals at the very top of the Premier League. And I think sometimes they're not missing out because the Newcastle United project is worse. They're missing out because these Big Six clubs are able to pay big wages. And if you have like a like for like with João Pedro, Newcastle, Chelsea, both Champions League football, excellent managers, players obviously going to get game time at both clubs. They start to think, what are the marginal gains? And that's where they may go, do I want to live in Newcastle or London? Do I want to purely look at it in financial terms? And obviously, it's clear Manchester United can offer Benjamin Šeško a higher package with bigger incentives, because their wage bill, even without European football, is bigger than Newcastle United. So sometimes you like both projects and you have to think about these other factors in making your decision. And I don't think Newcastle have missed out on a number of these players simply because of the Newcastle project. I think actually they've raised their level of ambition, but the wage structure can't move at the same pace as that ambition until they have Champions League football in back-to-back seasons like some of the Big Six clubs. Then regarding Šeško, of course, we have to be patient. We have to respect that we are live at the moment on a Tuesday lunch. My feeling is by the time people watch this, come the afternoon or the evening, we will have a clearer indication of whether or not Leipzig are going to accept the Manchester United offer, and there it could then end up moving very quickly. So I would keep your eyes peeled, but at the moment I'm led to believe that Manchester United would not have bid without encouragement, which could well suggest bad news for Newcastle United.
What does this mean for Alexander Isak? We know that the bid from Liverpool was rejected. We had discussions last week over a second bid potentially coming in as well. If Benjamin Šeško goes to Manchester instead of Newcastle, could that mean that Alexander Isak could stay at St James's Park?
No, I think the Isak situation is a bit more complicated, or flexible might even be a better word than that. So Newcastle's perspective is not they were going all in on Šeško so they could sell Isak, although perhaps that was the simplest solution. It's more down to the fact that they need a replacement, if not replacements plural. So let's not forget that if Newcastle are to lose out on Benjamin Šeško, they have Nicholas Jackson, they have Ollie Watkins, Lois Openda's another at Leipzig, and of course Johan Wissa. And I think if Newcastle got one big name or two attackers in, then the Isak situation will remain. And there's plenty of players that are desperate to join Newcastle United, despite sometimes how the business is painted. Johan Wissa is basically on strike because he wants to join Newcastle United. So I don't think it's Šeško or bust for Newcastle. And if he goes to Manchester United, Isak has to stay. I think it's still a case of fine replacements. The feeling was just more, if it was Šeško, he was such a big name target and fee that they were in essence spending some of the Isak money. Whereas if they don't get Šeško and they do Wissa first, that's affordable even with Isak staying. And in that scenario, I think we might need to wait for Newcastle United to line up a Jackson, a Watkins and a Openda or another in addition to Wissa. And then still the Alexander Isak situation will likely resolve itself with potentially an exit. Where we are at the moment with Isak is very clear that Liverpool are just stepping back. They're waiting for encouragement and the dominoes to fall. They're not inclined to bid again now, but that's completely different to walking away. So Liverpool will have known if Šeško was on a plane to Newcastle, if he still is in the next 24 hours, if we get another twist, then ultimately that might speed up the Isak pursuit. But I don't think Isak going to Manchester United ends Liverpool's pursuit of Alexander Isak. They are just waiting patiently for the right time in the market to bid again, and that's why there's no inclination to bid now, because the timing is seen as wrong. But that does not mean that this Isak to Liverpool saga is over.
Ben, just to finish up then, in the Sun this morning, there was reports of Ollie Watkins joining Manchester United. You mentioned him with Newcastle there. What's the likelihood of this, and does that free up some of Aston Villa's PSR as well?
Yeah, Aston Villa feel PSR compliant for the last financial year. My understanding, as we reported on talkSPORT, was they were looking for about 75 million in. 55 million came in through the sale of their women's team to their parent company. And a bit like when Chelsea sold a couple of hotels and a car park or whatever, there were other assets as well. So Villa are PSR compliant, but naturally, because they've not got Champions League football, even though they are, of course, in the Europa League, they'll be thinking about the health of their books for this coming financial year too. So there could be a situation where suitors try for Ollie Watkins. We have to be respectful to Villa's position. Manchester United had Watkins and Šeško. They decided to prioritise Šeško. Before they did that, they made an inquiry to Villa, and Villa said 60 million valuation, preference to keep, and that would only change if a replacement came in. And that's where we're at with Ollie Watkins. And I don't think the player who's got 3 years left on his contract is pushing or agitating for a move, even though I was told a few weeks ago if Manchester United did formalise their interest, he would be open to having that conversation. Newcastle could be there. He's on the list if they don't get Šeško. Nicholas Jackson is another name, and obviously Johan Wissa that I've said before. So I think Newcastle will be taking stock now to determine what their next move is if they miss out on Benjamin Šeško, and that's where we may hear a lot more about either Nicholas Jackson or Ollie Watkins. I sense Watkins is harder to get out of Aston Villa at Newcastle's valuation. And I think when Newcastle inquired recently, they were told exactly the same thing as Manchester United, 60 million, preference to keep. And obviously Villa will have to be active in the market, not just with a striker, but maybe a left-sided attacker as well. Jackson's a bit easier to get out of Chelsea. I think it's more likely that he leaves than stays. And Chelsea's valuation, which has been as high as 80 million in the early part of the window, may drop a little bit. So if Newcastle want Jackson, they'll have a little bit more buy-in in the club-to-club negotiations from Chelsea than if they start knocking on Aston Villa's door for Ollie Watkins. And what I would say as well is that if there are Watkins offers, I don't think there's a scenario even late in the window where the valuation of Watkins drops below 50 million. We've heard some suggestions in the last few weeks that maybe Villa might entertain a sale for 40, 45 million. That's not my understanding. I think Villa are quite firm on their 60, and the lowest it's going to drop under any circumstances is probably 50 million if it drops at all. And this is why I think if Newcastle decide post Šeško, if they don't get him, to pick between Watkins and Jackson, they might like Watkins, but they may find that deal much harder to do, whereas Chelsea are willing to let Nicholas Jackson leave this window.
Ben Jacobs, thank you very much for your time, ladies and gentlemen. Please remember to subscribe just down below to the talkSPORT YouTube channel. Another crazy day and afternoon of transfers. Listen, you don't want to miss this one. Keep up to date right here on the talkSPORT YouTube channel.